Welcome to Catastrophes. This is a podcast about disasters, why disasters happen, and the factors that make them happen. We discuss disasters and their implicit nature, some of the reasons why they happen, but then also how human mismanagement can really influence the outcome and have other implications from these disasters. Today, we are discussing heat waves and the science behind heat waves. I've actually brought on a guest interview, Dr. Sarah Perkins-Kirkpatrick, who is a researcher out of Australia and a climate scientist and professor. She has many titles, but she also has her own podcast called Totally Cooked and is a climate change related podcast. I'm very happy to be able to give everybody information about it during the interview itself. And the intent of today is actually a little bit of a science exploration. So I hope you're able to learn as much as I did. I certainly had a blast researching and looking into this topic before even talking with Sarah and learning as much as I did during this interview. And with that, the intent of exploring today's heat wave disaster is not to demean or diminish the experiences of people who are facing this traumatic event, but rather explore, question, critique, and ask why, number one, heat waves are becoming worse and why they have really predominantly been destructive in the summer of 2025 in the Northern Hemisphere. And with that, I am going to just do a short introduction of Sarah quickly before we get into the interview, because I think her background is fascinating. She actually specialized in her PhD in extreme weather and heat as an extreme, basically, problem. And some of the findings that she has, we actually discuss in the interview, so I won't spoil that much. But she does have her podcast. I'll reference that as well. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is that she's actually one of the authors for the 7th edition of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which is coming out in 2027, I believe. And that's a huge milestone in anybody's career because it is some of the world-leading experts talking about climate change, how it's happening, why it's happening, and the confidence levels. And so at the time of recording, Sarah did not know if she was in that, but she is. And so I just think that is like very, very cool. So absolutely have to give her props for that because, again, a huge milestone. And with that, you can reach out to Sarah on LinkedIn. She is really active there, but then also Blue Sky. And her connection, her contact information will be provided at the end of the episode. So with that, I hope you enjoy today's episode and sit back and get ready to learn about heat waves. Welcome, Sarah, to Catastrophe, the podcast about disasters. I wanted to quickly, before I introduce you, thank you for taking the time to talk with me and my audience about summer heat waves. And your background is fascinating, and in fact, your podcast that you have is also fascinating. We'll get into all of that, but first, I just wanted to welcome you on. And if you could maybe give us a little introduction about yourself, what you do, who you are, that'd be excellent.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Happy to do that. And thank you for having me. My name's Sarah Perkins-Kirkpatrick. Sarah is totally fine. The rest is a bit of a mouthful. I'm a professor of climate science at the Australian National University in Canberra. So my specialty in that is looking at extreme heat events. So I've done a lot of work on understanding how heat waves have changed in the climatological record. So at what speed they're changing, how they're changing, why they're changing, what's natural changes, what's human caused, and what do future changes of heat waves look like. And I'm also now starting to do or lead research looking at the health impacts of heat waves and also other impacts as well. So impacts on energy supply in Australia, impacts on ecosystems. I'm not actually doing a whole lot of research anymore, but I'm leading a team that's doing a lot of that these days as well.
Oh, that's excellent. Wow. What a background. Can I ask what the research on your mind right now is?
Okay, so yeah, I've got a paper that's just come back from review, and actually the reviews were quite minor, which is always encouraging as an academic.
Very good.
But it's looking at what heat waves look like post net zero. So I'm assuming perhaps that your audience has heard, I guess, in the zeitgeist, the global zeitgeist, about how we need to reach net zero emissions. So basically, we need to stop putting more carbon in the atmosphere. And what we've tried to do is look at, well, what happens to extreme heat when we do reach net zero, whether that's in 2030 or 2060 or somewhere in between. And we've done this using a physical climate model. We've run the model all the way out, for another 1,000 years effectively, which is a really long time. And then just basically looked at the behavior of heat waves in each of those sort of net zero ideas. And it's actually like really quite sobering, because even someone like myself, we've thrown around like, oh yeah, after net zero, things will start to get normal in a couple of generations, maybe a bit longer. Like, it will all be fine in a couple of 100 years. It'll all go back to normal. Wow. And it actually doesn't. At least this is what this first line of evidence is telling us, that, especially actually everywhere in the world, heat waves don't get better. They don't necessarily get worse post net zero, but they don't get better. And in some places like Australia, especially in the Southern Hemisphere, we're seeing heat waves still increase over the 1,000-year period post net zero. And that's regardless of whether we reach net zero in 5 years or in 35 years.
Wow.
So this, there's a bit of a caveat there that this is just one climate model. Maybe a different climate model might say something a little bit different. And we don't really know yet, because this is such a new field, is, understanding climate post net zero. But it's quite sobering, because we all know how important net zero is. Like, we have to reach it. That's imperative, and there's no way out of that. But what it also shows us is it's not going to completely fix the problem like we all hope it will. Wow. That especially when it comes to something like extreme heat, adaptation is also imperative, which we can do. For the most part, we can do that, at least when it comes to extreme heat. So yeah, that's on my mind a bit, because I was one of those scientists that would just get in the media and say, oh yeah, post net zero, things will start to improve.
Be okay, yeah.
Yeah, it will be okay. It might take some time, but yeah, we can all, once we know we're at net zero, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. And yes, we can do that a little bit, but not as much as what we previously thought. And something else on top of that, which we kind of expected this result, is the longer you delay net zero, the worse things become.
Of course. Yep.
Even by 5 years, though, this is the thing that got me for me, I'm like, oh, of course, yes, it did get worse. I'm not surprised by that. But even 5 to 10 years makes a huge difference. It's a completely different climate regime. If you look at the timeline of heat waves in, say, reaching net zero in 2030 versus 2040 or even 2035, the time series barely even overlaps. It's just a completely different climate. The variability doesn't even match up.
Wow.
And that was surprising to me, that just how much 5 to 10 years can make a difference.
Wow. Well, this is going to be a great conversation if you're going to be bringing that kind of content. Yeah.
I'll just preface though, because that's not good news.
No.
But there's never, we should always have hope that, yes, we're very unlikely to reach net zero by 2030, but we still have a lot of time to reach net zero well before 2050. So there's still always hope that we can avoid the most disastrous outcome. And we should focus on that, do as much as we can to get it down as soon as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of your background that I found really intriguing is the ability to basically synthesize these really difficult concepts in science and talk about them in kind of layman terms. So I'll definitely be picking your brain on that part in this interview. Before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of everything, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast, Totally Cooked?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I guess this kind of, relates to what you were just saying. So part of my role, or part of my job, is a deputy director on a centre of excellence. So in Australia, I won't go into too much detail, but we have this, government funding system like you would in the North Americas as well. And one of the big, the crown jewel in this funding system is a centre of excellence. And it's basically research funding for 7 years, where a consortium of universities work together to solve an ambitious problem. So we're researching future weather change in the face of climate change. Within this research centre, I'm the deputy director leading the communication, engagement and outreach portfolio, so otherwise communication portfolio. And so we decided to go on a whim a bit and put a podcast together so we can talk about complex climate and weather phenomena, which is a word in itself, and break it down for people who might just be a little bit interested in science, but haven't really, delved into it yet. So, they kind of accept climate change is a thing, but that's where their knowledge ends to begin with. And so we're trying to break it down in layman's terms. We're trying to, have it delivered in a humorous way. So kind of like a conversation that you'd have with a mate at a barbecue or at the pub, or I don't know, on a walk or something like that. Not like some sort of lecture, traditional lecture in a university, but something much more fun. And, so far so good. We've only released 5 episodes so far, but yeah, so far so good that the feedback's been really good. And I really love doing it. It's the best part of my job at the moment. So yeah, fingers crossed it keeps going up and up.
And the most recent episode about Antarctica and
yeah,
like the significance of, an entire huge body of land in our world and how it influences everything.
Well, so I learned a lot. So what we're trying to do as well, the first few episodes was just me, my co-host Ian, just talking about basic weather and climate, but we're also bringing in guest experts who know more about a particular topic. So even though I'm a climate scientist, I definitely don't know everything about the climate. I would never pretend to do so. And when we've had guests on, like Neroli Abram, who talked about Antarctica, I even learned a lot. Like I learned about how endangered the emperor penguins are. I learned about one of the ice sheets in Antarctica being 2 kilometers below sea level, how ice cores work. It's not just about the rings, but it's about the salt concentration, like all of these things that I didn't know. So it's a big learning journey for us all. And hopefully it goes really well. It's available wherever all podcasts are found.
Excellent. Yeah. And I will link the description so people are able to find your podcast pretty easy. Awesome. I recommend the Antarctica episode, but then also the wildfire episode. And we're going to draw a little bit on that today.
It's funny that you bring that one up because my husband is actually in the rural fire service here in Australia. He has been for like 2 or 3 decades. And he was also a career firefighter in the Defence Force here for some time. And that's the one episode that I made him listen to. And like every 5 minutes he paused that and he's like, now, Sarah, that's not actually entirely correct. And he would give me his very specific definition. I'm like, this is for a general audience. I know this is.
Oh, yeah. I've heard it all.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, all right.
We're always learning it. And that's the best part about it. And one of the reasons why I'm having you on this podcast, because I mean, like, first of all, I just love to learn. So this is more for me, if anything. But yeah, anyways. So today we are going to be discussing heat waves. And this is a part of the Future of Summer series. And so the idea of what does the future of our summers look around the world? And particularly I'm focusing on kind of urban centers, cities, and then how disasters are influencing those sorts of things. So when we think about heat waves, I really wanted to just get your quick 60-second take on how is climate change affecting heat waves?
Yeah, cool. So climate change and heat waves are very closely linked, and it's a very sensitive relationship. So if you increase global average temperature, you will increase the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves basically anywhere in the world. And the sensitivity of that relationship depends on what's going on in a particular location. So, for example, in the Mediterranean, heat waves are warming twice as fast as the global average temperature. So for every 2 degrees rise, you'll see a 4 degrees increase in heat wave intensity. Whereas here in Australia, it's a bit less than that. So there is that regional variation, which depends on like local scale processes and that sort of thing. But bottom line, if you warm the planet through whatever means, you will see heat waves increase as well.
Wow. Okay. So one of the things that I've been kind of fascinated with lately is nighttime temperatures, especially during heat waves. And for probably the firefighters who have, like, whenever I talk with firefighters, they're always saying like it's like the daytime temperatures are hot, yes, but the nighttime temperatures have just never been this hot before. And wildfires, particularly, they are still conflagrating. They're still getting bigger and spreading, and there's just not that time period of cooling. So that's
So that's actually that hits 2 points there. So firstly, like over a decade ago, it's kind of old news now in climate science, but it's still very important. Like we realized that temperatures that occur during cooler parts of the day and also cooler parts of the year are warming faster than the relative warmer parts. So that speaks to exactly that on the ground experience. And on top of that, the effect that has on the human body is your body doesn't have enough time to reset. So if you have like really hot temperatures in the day, but cooler temperatures at night, your body can relax, recover, sleep, rejuvenate.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're having hot day, then hot night, then hot day, it's disastrous because your body simply can't recover. It's like, doing lots of exercise all the time. You're not giving your body enough time to recover and, and move on and regenerate. So yeah, it is really important. And even some heat wave definitions out there, for example, the one we use here in Australia, incorporate nighttime temperatures for that reason. In part because of health impacts and in part because of the effects it has on our emergency responders.
Yeah, and that was one of the findings or something that they discussed in a paper out of Europe. I'll try to find it and I'll talk about it more, hopefully on like the primer to this episode or this interview.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, in June and July, just this past few months, I mean, Europe has experienced a significant amount of heat waves, and like
it's been like I said to you just before I started recording, like it seems like Canada has literally gone up in flames every year for at least the last 5 years, probably longer. But similar with Europe, they've had heat wave after heat wave after heat wave literally every summer, and it just rolls around. You can almost set your watch to it. It's it's happening that frequent. Australia is a bit different because we still have lots of influence from El Nino and its sister La Nina. We have a much more variable climate, but we're still definitely warming, and our heat waves are still going up when they do occur.
Absolutely. So before we get to the next question, I wanted to get your thoughts on this photo that I was able to. This is from Instagram. It's from a site called Greenpeace, and I thought it was a really interesting way to conceptualize what climate change is for most people. Climate change will manifest as a series of disasters viewed through phones with footage that gets closer and closer until you are the one filming it.
Hard agree. And it's like, I haven't seen this before. I absolutely agree with it. And I have often thought, because I'm recording this episode at home today, and we live in a part of Canberra where I can see a mountain range called the Brindabellas. It's beautiful. I love it. I, drive home from work and see the sunset over the Brindabellas, and there's nothing more beautiful. However, about 20 years ago, some really bad bushfires came through Canberra and swept across the Brindabellas and almost made its way into the city centre. And we kind of burnt where I live now. It wasn't a suburb back then. And I have often thought about, well, what would happen the next time, not if, but when, the next time the Brindabellas go alight? And would I be the one standing on my front porch or driving into my suburb filming this sort of fire? And, obviously linking it back to climate change, because there is a known link there. And it speaks to that. It speaks to my own thoughts, as well as speaking to the frog in the pot of water that doesn't know what's going on until it's boiling. And at that stage, it deceases, it dies. So it's you don't know it's happening until suddenly you're the one caught into it. And by that time, it's too late.
Yeah, that's well said. I love that metaphor. I mean, the frog in the boiling pot of water.
Well, this is sorry, I'm on a bit of a soapbox now.
Yeah.
But this kind of happened in Australia right before COVID. We had what we called our Black Summer. It made the news everywhere. I'm sure I was doing media interviews for America and Canada, left, right, and center at the time. But anyway, we had some horrendous bushfires in Southeast Australia. There's all these stats going around about how much was burnt, how many animals died. I can't remember them all, but it was abhorrent what happened. And it kind of seemed to be like a turning point here in Australia, where the average Australian kind of stood up and took notice and was like, oh God, yeah, this is an issue. And our Prime Minister at the time, I'll just say that he wasn't the best at the job, would go around trying to shake hands with firefighters and force them to do so, even though they didn't want that to happen. So no one took him seriously in his reaction, but everyone was taking it seriously and going, oh, climate change is now a problem. So much so that I'd say it was over 70% of Australians after that said climate change is an issue and we need to do more about it.
Wow.
So it was almost like, we had to have a disaster that bad to make people sit up and notice, which I guess, for want of a better term, is a silver lining.
Yep.
However, then COVID happened.
Yeah.
The country shut down, lockdown happened. So I do wonder what will be the next disaster here for that to happen again. How much worse will the next lot of bushfires be? And then will it be too late for us, little frogs in the, in the pot of water.
So in your view, do you think it's a sense of complacency, or is it a sense of I can't do enough
I
about
would
this
say,
large thing?
I'd say it's more that. I would say it's more people not realizing, like it's too much, basically. Like, well, this is more than just a me problem. It's more than just me turning off my lights and investing in a solar rig.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do a lot until the government actually pulls its head in and stops, opening new fossil fuel projects, which is happening all the time here. So I think there's a bit of that.
Mm.
I think the science is reasonably well accepted these days. Like, I don't get as many hate emails saying you're wrong, carbon doesn't increase warming. There's still the odd person.
Yep.
But certainly the general rhetoric publicly has changed.
Mm-hmm.
But we are, and I know that we're not looked well upon on the global scale about how we handle our emissions, and that's completely fair. So I think a lot of people think the problem's it's a lot bigger than them, and then what can they do to, contribute the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, yeah, that's exactly. It's, will me recycling, me riding a bike, will, me stopping, going on planes really have that much of a difference? And the rhetoric I've heard online is, well, Taylor Swift is still, I don't mean to go after Taylor Swift because I'm a fan, but, she's still riding her plane.
So I roll my eyes, not at Taylor Swift, but at everyone else having a go at her. Like, fine, she's doing that. Like, I'm not saying that I condone that, but that's not the right way to go about it. Like the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says, every ton of carbon counts, which is absolutely true. But similarly, everyone reducing their emissions by a little bit also counts. And we need everyone to be doing this imperfectly, as opposed to just a few people doing this perfectly. That will make the biggest difference. And on top of that, change is slow. Like, no one is saying stop flying tomorrow, stop using electricity tomorrow, stop driving your car tomorrow, stop feeding your kids tomorrow. No one is saying that. We know that the change is going to take time, so let's start to instigate that now. And that's what people can do at home. Start by turning off your lights more. Then maybe once you've got that, in the bag, start driving your car less, or, start saving for an EV. They're actually cheaper to run, I'll say. And I know that from experience. Just things like that. Add to your list as you go, and that new routine is created. And that's what will make the difference.
Yeah, brilliant. Well said. So shifting, no, it's okay. So shifting this conversation from climate change, its implications, to climate change and disasters.
Yeah.
Hearing about heat waves, and I think you summarized it well. Our warming climate, not just in specific parts of the world, all around the world, is influencing the magnitude, severity of heat waves. And then we had our discussion about nighttime temperatures. So for the science behind increasing temperatures for heat waves, do you think disasters caused by heat waves are going to also increase? And
yes.
Okay.
Bottom line. By how much, I couldn't tell you, but yes.
And is there a specific one that you think is more relevant than others?
Oh, this is a really good question. So I would strongly argue that heat waves, or extreme heat events. So actually, I should define heat waves. Heat waves are just basically defined as prolonged periods of excessive heat. What defines prolonged and excessive ultimately depends on why you're looking at heat waves and where you are. But usually we say at least 3 days in a row where temperatures are in the top 5 to 10% of that time of year. So, for example, a heat wave where you are might be cooler than a heat wave, say, in Sydney, Australia, but it's still a heat wave relative to that location. And that's what we've got to keep in mind, because everyone who lives there is adapted to that, all of the ecosystems there, all the
infrastructure.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what matters. So, what exact temperature you use, or if you include humidity or wind or whatever, it's irrelevant for this conversation. They all matter depending on why you're looking at heat waves, but it's just a bit hot for at least a few days in a row, but likely longer. And I would argue that heat waves impact everything, whether it's building infrastructure, obviously power supply, human health, sport, learning in schools, water availability, ecosystems. They affect everyone and everything, just to different extents. And it also depends how well we're able to kind of mitigate and adapt to these events as well. Yeah. But in Australia, at least, and we don't really suffer from earthquakes or volcanoes here, we do suffer from basically everything else. Heat waves kill more people than all other natural disasters combined.
Wow.
And the most deaths due to extreme heat on any given day of the year is the day after our, well, I loosely say our national day. It's called Australia Day. It's when white people came to Australia, and it's contentious, but that's a completely different topic.
Mm-hmm.
But the day after that, because being Australian, we all like to sit outside and drink a lot and enjoy, the hot weather that happens here in January. So it's the known effect. It's hard to say for sure how that relates in other parts of the world, because there are other natural disasters that can obviously kill a lot of people in a shorter period of time. But I think it was in Europe last year or the year before, something like 600,000 deaths were attributed to extreme heat. And then we had the heat wave in 2003 in Europe, which killed 70,000 people alone.
Wow.
And a lot of that was due to the fact that no one knew what to do or how to behave, because we have had heat waves since then that have been far worse in terms of their magnitude, but have not killed as many people. So that just kind of speaks to the importance of behavioral adaptation and mitigation against these events.
Absolutely.
So I think, I guess I'm kind of not convincing myself, but getting to the point that human health is, I think, the one that really makes people stand up or sit up and take notice when it comes to extreme heat. And we've actually seen it in Southeast Asia, really for the last decade, but especially in the last few years, right before their monsoon hits. They've been getting some enormous heat waves that are coupled with very high humidity, which actually makes it much harder for the body to stay cool, because the sweat can't evaporate on the skin because there's already too much moisture in the air because the humidity is really high. And because of that, we're seeing, people die of heat stroke, likely underreported. And it's just, I don't know if anyone's read a book called The Ministry for the Future. I'm not sure if it's available worldwide. I can't remember who wrote it, but basically I've only just started this book now, but it starts off with a heat wave occurring over India, where something like 20 million people are killed. And it's not like it's based on science, but it's not based on an actual event.
Yeah.
And to think about that, and to think about in the last few years, well, we're starting to see these sorts of heat waves emerge.
Yeah.
They haven't killed that many people, at least not yet, but maybe there's a point in the future where they do get that bad, which is, again, like, I kind of choke up thinking about that, because that's basically, it's just shy of the whole population of Australia wiped out in one go.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, on my podcast, I've had the discussion about census and how accurate is census data, particularly when we think about the people who are the most vulnerable, the people who will have the least amount of resources. And in India, particularly, their census problems are astronomical, to the point where.
Absolutely, there's that, and how they report their excess deaths. Like maybe some people just perish and they're not in medical care, or and like we struggle with reporting deaths due to extreme heat or hospitalizations due to extreme heat, because they exacerbate underlying conditions. And that's in the Western world, where we have relatively good records, let alone in countries where they simply do not have the resources to report this. I would, hand on heart, would say that we're severely underestimating the health impacts of extreme heat in these locations especially.
Wow. So moving to basically a discussion about our cities and how we've built our cities. I'm aware of the urban heat island effect.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm not an urban climatologist, but I can definitely talk about this. So basically, when you replace like a well-vegetated area with a city, and you can think of, name a city. Basically, every city has at least some component of this. Lots of impervious surfaces, lack of trees, dark surfaces as well. You're basically blocking out natural processes and natural cooling. So when you think about a forest, there's a lot of evaporation, or what we say evapotranspiration going on, and that's when the trees are losing moisture to the atmosphere through respiration and not natural processes. Wow. That helps keep that local environment cool, as well as the shading that these trees produce. However, when you cut them down and put a big city up with materials that absorb heat, like concrete and dark roofs and that sort of thing, the temperature can rise, and it does. So the temperatures can be anywhere from like 1 or 2 degrees to up to 8 or 9 degrees warmer in an urban area relative to an otherwise natural ecosystem at that same location. And it depends on how much urbanization has happened. And the effect is worse at night. So because of these structures like concrete that trap in the heat, they then re-radiate it out more slowly, and that keeps the heat up at night much more so than the temperature. The temperature effect during the day is a lot less due to the urban heat island effect. But it's definitely more noticeable at night. It traps that heat in, as we've spoken about, people can't stay cool or regenerate, and it's just a recipe for disaster. And I've been speaking to, I guess he's an urban climatologist in the University of Western Sydney. We're actually on a video together that BBC produced a number of years ago now. And he went out and measured like the temperature of dark concrete versus light concrete. And the temperature difference was like 10 to 15 degrees. So even if we still lived in urban areas, but changed the color, literally the color of these surfaces, it means a lot in terms of how much extra heat is trapped in. So an urban heat island won't necessarily start a heat wave, but it will definitely exacerbate the conditions of that heat wave for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I mean the conditions. There's a case in one of our territories here in Canada, the Yukon.
Yes. Yep.
Over the past like 25 years, they typically don't see very many days. I think it's like 3 or so is their average of days over 25 degrees. And it's far north, so we always picture the Arctic being cold. They've had a significant amount of days over that 20 to 25 degree mark. And when we look at like the urban cities, a lot of it is lots of concrete. There's few less trees, but I'm thinking that might speak more to the climate change side, warming in the Arctic, than it might the urban heat effect.
It would. Yeah, so definitely, 25 degrees is still a little bit too cold for me. This is why I live in Australia and but yeah, that would be so that the increase in 25 degree days would certainly, there'd be a climate change element from that. But if you're measuring that in a city, there would definitely be an urban heat island effect as well. But if it's much more widespread and covering the forest of that region as well, then that's definitely a climate change signal for sure. And you can kind of think, right, like maybe way back when they were building all these urban areas, it wasn't really an issue. If anything, in Western society, you wanted things to be a bit warmer. It was a bit of a plus without realizing it. But now we're, especially in Australia, we're at the opposite end of that. I live in a suburb now where there's incentives for people to build energy efficient house. So we have a white roof, which helps reflect the sunlight straight back out to space. And we have extra insulation. We don't have gas connected to the house. Like all of these things to make sure that we're energy efficient. And I think in some parts of Australia now, some states and territories, you have to have a white roof on your, like if you build a new house, you have to put a white roof on it because it makes that much of a difference. So even making simple changes like that can, that's an adaptation strategy that helps keep people cooler in their houses. They use less power. They stay cooler during extreme heat events, and they're less likely to be affected in terms of their health.
Yeah. Wow. That's well said. Okay. So a different kind of question.
Yep.
When we think about the future of heat waves and the future of our summers, what do you anticipate being the greatest challenge for us to overcome?
Keeping everyone cool. I know that's very general. I think, I don't know. I don't know if there's one thing. I think people being aware of just how deadly these events are. Like, no, not just in Australia. Like, we're used to heat, we're kind of proud of it, but we're still not great at adapting to it. But even going to Europe and seeing how they cope with it. I was at a workshop a decade ago, and it was during a heat wave in Paris. It was like mid to high 30s. So it was genuinely hot, even for an Australian. And there was about 20 or 30 scientists in a room, and they shut the doors. There was no windows open, there was no fan, and there was no air conditioning. And I'm sitting there like I was dying. And everyone was kind of poking fun at me. They're like, oh, the Australians not coping. But I'm like, this is how we cope. Fine, you don't have air conditioning, but open a window. And they're like, oh, no, it'll be too noisy. I'm like, you need airflow. This is how you stay cool. Like we just know this because this is how we're brought up. But these are genuine adaptation and mitigation strategies. So it was very interesting. Like for me, it was an eye-opener, that sort of comparison that for some people, this is ingrained. For others, it's not. And this is the issue moving forward. How do we educate this and actually just make this a commonality literally everywhere? And on top of that, then there's also things called compound events. So Heat waves kill people, as I mentioned. I would argue that they impact everyone and everything, but they can also exacerbate other types of catastrophes or disasters. So I had a PhD student basically demonstrate that during our Black Summer, the heat waves that we had immediately before the fires started contributed to an increase in drying of fine fuel. And that made the conditions that much worse. So it didn't, start the bad fire weather, but it definitely contributed to it. And similarly, we're more likely to have heat waves when we're in a drought. That doesn't matter where you are in the world. But when you're having a heat wave, it dries out the conditions much more rapidly, therefore amplifying the drought. So you have these droughts, fires, and heat waves. They're all kind of like, I don't know, best buddies, if you will, and kind of feed off and amplify one another. So if you think about that, it's not usually just the heat wave. There's usually other extreme events that happen at the same time or after that also have a really bad impact as well. And we need to be better prepared for these sorts of compound events as well.
Absolutely. And in disaster in 2023, Maui Lahaina wildfire, they saw a lot of excessive winds and then really hot temperatures just before, and they're used to it, right? So, but just the sheer dryness of the area around that really helped.
Well, and that's the thing. Like a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, and there's a general rule that we call it the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship, that with every degree warmer the air is, that it can hold 7% more moisture than the degree below it. So it's it's not a linear increase; it's more exponential-ish. So if you think about an 18-degree day, a 19-degree day can hold 7% more moisture. A 20-degree day can hold 7% more again, and so on and so forth. So you think, firstly, global average temperature has reached, we're not quite at 1.5 degrees in terms of, permanently there, but give or take 1.5 degrees, we can hold maybe 10% more moisture than what we could at, 0 degrees above pre-industrial. But then if you have a heat wave, which, for a local area can be up to 20 to 30 degrees warmer than what it is on average, how much moisture is being sucked up into the atmosphere? It dries out far more quickly because you have that gradient with the land surface and the atmosphere. And so, things are drying out more quickly, and we're really starting to see this signal emerge. We can see it in Australia, but not just there. Hawaii is a good example of that, as is Canada and parts of Northern America as well.
So if I could ask an off the cuff question, do those numbers correlate? Like, do our heat waves also correlate with the amount of intensive rainfalls that we're seeing as well? Or are those separate processes?
Yeah, look, I don't actually know. There's a few people that are starting to research this now, the compound effects of heat waves and, extreme rainfall events. Like, do they occur one after each other? Do they occur at the same time? So in Australia, when we get heat waves in the far southeast, so around where Melbourne is and Tasmania is, we often have a tropical cyclone, or at least a deep low pressure system in northwest Australia. So there's this dynamical atmospheric link. And we know why a little bit, but we don't know, the ins and outs of how that's changing and how important that relationship is. You can have these compound events over large spatial scales, but over the same area. It's hard to know for sure. So certainly if you had a change in wind pattern, you had this heat wave, it was really, really bloody hot, but then suddenly you had a shift in the weather patterns and it started to rain, or you had a thunderstorm come through. More rain could technically fall, yes, because suddenly that air is cooled and all the moisture has to come out.
Yeah, and we think about the dry ground, it doesn't absorb those are how we see flash floods. And I mean, we're seeing flash floods in Spain right now. And
what's happened in Spain last year. We actually had this, funnily enough, in Australia. Was it last year or the year before? In Victoria, in southeast Australia, where we had really bad bushfires and then we had really bad rainfall come straight after it. So whether or not that's linked with that relationship we've just discussed, that remains to be researched.
Yeah.
But certainly, you can kind of make sense that, it's hot, really hot. It's record heat. More moisture can technically be in the atmosphere. May not be, but it could potentially be. And if you get the true effect after the heat wave for that moisture to fall out, more could feasibly fall out.
Yeah, and I think you're saying like there's not 100% certainty that one is going to cause the next, right? And
No,
and that's
it
exactly one.
theoretically it makes sense unless there's something
Mhm.
missing here that we haven't researched yet.
Yeah, and when we think about like just disasters as a whole, I mean, there are a whole bunch of catalysts that really cause a
Yes.
single event, and we always try to associate it's just this one. It's just whether it's climate change or how we're building our cities or this and this. That's what
Yeah.
really I look to explore as those kind of vulnerabilities and those kinds of causes and reasons. So I think your
Well,
point is really
you can't really have like a hazard, is it, or a catastrophe without there being an impact. And you can't have an impact unless there's really people or something in its way. So we could have like the worst heat wave in the world, but if it's happening over a desert where no one lives and
exactly.
there's nothing there, does it really matter? Like I would argue yes, personally, but other people may not. And that's, if you don't live there or if you don't care about what's happening there because there is nothing there, then there's certainly an argument for that.
Yeah, you might be interested in. There's a campaign ongoing from the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Agency called No Natural Disasters. And it's this
Yeah,
idea that we as people actually play a large role in the effects of disasters. And so, in the
absolutely.
sense that these natural disasters are not actually as natural as we suppose or presuppose them to be, that we control a lot of the outcomes. And yeah.
100%. And I think that speaks to what I said earlier about heat waves. Like in Australia, we get a lot of heat waves and they are really bloody hot. Yes, we have a smaller population relative to Europe, but we also know what to do a bit better here. It's just, again, it's ingrained. It's how we've been brought up. So,
Mhm.
naturally speaking per capita, there is somewhat of a less impact, or at least there used to be, because, there's that behavioral adaptation there. So that speaks to the people and the vulnerability living in those different locations.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Thank you.
One of the last questions I have for you, I guess, really pulls at your title of basically science communicator. How do you respond when people say climate change is hopeless? I can't
Oh,
do anything about it.
yeah. So yeah, no, certainly my first reaction is one of like, no, a hard no, that's not true. There is so much we can do, and so much that we've done already. I think this is an important point to remember. We used to use, in terms of future projections, the worst case scenario, the business of usual scenario, as the most likely future. And that showed that so the global average temperature would increase between I think it was 3 to 6 degrees, likely around 4 to 5. We
Mm,
don't use that as the most likely anymore. We've dropped down
yeah.
maybe a degree or two in terms of global warming. That's because we've started to do something globally. Yes,
Wow.
we might not be doing as much. Well, we're definitely not doing as much as we need to limit warming to 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius, but we're no longer at that worst case scenario. Now, that's something that we should celebrate from. I would celebrate and gain momentum from. It's not hopeless. Like, we know it's us. We know it's the cause, we're the cause, and we know what we need to do to fix it. And this is more knowledge than we had 20 or 30 years ago.
Mm,
And on top of that, I can't really speak for everywhere in the world, but at least in Australia, green energy is much cheaper than fossil energy now.
mm,
We're a bit behind the mark in terms of getting EVs here at an
mhm.
affordable price, but suddenly, we're seeing more drive around, and
Yeah.
these things are becoming more accessible. So it's not a hopeless cause. I know it can seem overwhelming and a lot, but there is so much more we can all do. And again, everyone doing it imperfectly is far better than just a few people doing it perfectly. I don't even do it perfectly. Or hand on heart would admit that I'm not carbon neutral. We try our best to keep our emissions as low as possible, but even then, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
Start small and then progressively build with what you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. And I kind of get that people sometimes feel really overwhelmed and I can't do a lot. This is too much. Reach climate anxiety or climate depression.
Yeah.
And I understand why that is, but I'm really trying to urge people not to kind of sit in that dark, depressive stage for too long if they can help it, and in not get depressed, but get angry, because then
Mm,
anger is much more of a mobilizing reaction. And if
mhm.
you're angry, you can do something about it. Get up and do something. Whether it's your own lifestyle or even campaigning politicians to do more, because we need all of those actions to really reduce our emissions as much as possible.
Yeah. That is so well said. Okay. I have an unscripted, even more difficult
Okay.
question for you.
All right, let's go. Let's do it.
So we had this great discussion about kind of our small actions. Sometimes, like when we think about heat waves, they might not actually lead to an immediate change.
Mm,
And humans, us, we're really tied to this gratification of now. Like, I need to see some
yeah.
change. And um,
Yep.
how do you convince people, or how do you try to encourage them to really buy in with the climate change adaptation and the belief that you are doing something when we aren't seeing all of these immediate benefits? We're seeing that really slow um, unfolding of success, but it just doesn't hit the same.
No, that's true. You know what? I've never actually really thought of it like that. For me, like I
Mhm.
kind of get the dopamine hit from just knowing I've made a change and I've made a permanent change. So, for example, having solar power on our roof or buying an
Mhm.
electric vehicle or buying a battery. Like, yes, these are all expensive things up front, but I know now that we've significantly taken a chunk off our electricity bill.
Nice.
Um, and it's reduced carbon in the atmosphere, and I sit well with that. But I guess that's a
Mhm.
biased point of view given what I do for a living.
Mhm.
But also, like, I have 3 kids, and I think about their
Mhm.
future. Um, one of them was born in our hottest summer on record. Another one, my eldest, I was pregnant with during one of Sydney's hottest summer on record, which is where we lived at the time. And I actually had a thought while I was pregnant with her, thinking, what am I doing? Why am I having a family? I've always wanted a family.
Mhm.
This is horrendous. The world that they're going to inherit is terrible. Like, I
Mhm.
couldn't even walk the dog in the weather. It was so hot.
Wow.
And let alone knowing what her life would be like when she was my age, and then her children, and so on and so forth. And I actually had someone, like, I was in a depressive state, and I had a colleague of mine said, well, you can't think like that. Like, you having children, and more than most, is a benefit, because you'll educate them and bring them up in a way to appreciate the problem, and do their bit to fix it. And that's the kind of, I've taken that point of view. Like, whatever we're doing, I may not see the benefits of it. Hell, even my kids may not, but their kids will. And we're passing that knowledge down. We're passing that information down, and that behavior down. I talked about how Australians are just generally a bit better with extreme heat than other parts of the world. This
Mhm.
is another way we can improve that. Like, you know, continue with that, as well as, well, no, don't leave your lights on, or make sure you buy a house with a
Mhm.
good solar rig, or choose your cars wisely. This is all important information to help them have a better future. Yeah, their future is going to be worse than what mine was at their age, and that is really sad and really
Mhm.
depressing, but I'm arming them with the knowledge and doing my bit to create a better world for them. And as a parent, I think that is the best I can do. I know not everyone has kids, I know, and that's fine. But even as adults, it's all about preserving the world for future generations. And that's, I guess, I sit better in that,
Yeah.
as opposed to me getting the benefits. I personally, I can look beyond that.
Well said. I think it's important to take that system global view as well, that
Exactly.
long-term view. It's not just about us
No.
immediately. It's always been, our systems have always been a chain of reactions that, have so many interrelated effects, and
Well,
it
every
goes.
little bit counts. Like, and
Yeah.
like I said earlier, the IPCC says every ton of carbon counts. Well, every action we can do to keep carbon in the ground counts too. It goes both ways.
Wonderful. That's a excellent way to end it. So I just want to encourage people to go find your podcast. And
Thank
can
you.
you
That would
remind
be
us,
great.
yeah, where can we find your podcast, and
So,
where can we
yeah,
connect with you on social media so we can ask more tough questions?
yeah, cool. So the podcast is called Totally Cooked, the climate and weather podcast, just Totally Cooked. You can put into Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We have a website. Basically, anywhere where podcasts are available, our podcast will be available. In terms of social media, I'm on Blue Sky. I was on Twitter, but that kind of died in a bad fire, didn't it?
Mhm.
Um, so I'm on Blue Sky. So it's sarahInScience.bsky.social, or whatever the last bit is. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So you can just search for Sarah Perkins-Kirkpatrick, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. The Center of Excellence that I work for, they have an Instagram handle. It's 21st Century Weather. It's also on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, lots of tough questions can be sent to me or them. I'm happy either way.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to thank you again. I learned so much, and I
Okay,
think that's
please. I had
sometimes
fun.
yeah, that's the metric for good or not. It's like, did you learn a lot? I learned so
Yeah,
much.
agree.
So
That's what
thank
I'm
you so
finding.
much.
That's what I'm finding in our podcast as well. Is like, yeah, it's like, oh, I've learned a lot of this, and I just really like to talk. So it's
Me too. And I mean, I'm going through a series of interviews, so I mean, this is like, yeah, I'm learning so much this summer. It's so great.
It's very rewarding, isn't it, to learn? I like it.
Yes. Well, thank you again for joining, and that is all we got for today. So thank you, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Brady.